college is supposed to be a time of freedom, discovery, and new beginnings. For most students, it's a world of late-night study sessions, laughter echoing through dorm hallways, and the comfort of knowing you're surrounded by friends. The campus becomes a second home, a place where routines feel safe and familiar. You walk back from the library under the glow of streetlights, pass by the same faces every day, and trust that the walls around you will keep out anything truly dangerous. But what if that sense of security is nothing more than an illusion? What if the scariest moments of your life happened in the place you thought was safest? Tonight, you'll hear 4 true stories that will make you question everything you know about college life. These aren't just tales of urban legends or rumors whispered at midnight. They're real experiences, lived by real people, in settings that might look a lot like your own. Before you settle in for another ordinary night on campus, listen closely. Because sometimes the most terrifying things happen when you least expect them, right where you feel most at home. The first day of college felt like the start of a new life. I remember the nervous excitement as I dragged my suitcase down the hallway of my dorm, searching for the room number printed on my keycard. The air buzzed with the sound of introductions, laughter, and the clatter of boxes being unpacked. My roommate, Tyler, was already there when I arrived. He looked up from his phone, offered a quick smile, and helped me carry my things inside. He seemed friendly enough, quiet, maybe a little reserved, but nothing out of the ordinary. We exchanged the usual small talk about majors, hometowns, and favorite movies. By the end of the day, I felt lucky to have landed someone so easygoing. The first week passed in a blur of orientation events and late-night pizza runs. Tyler kept to himself, but he was polite and always asked if I needed anything from the store. He had a habit of staying up late, headphones on, eyes glued to his laptop. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the glow of his screen, but I chalked it up to insomnia or a heavy workload. After all, college was full of night owls. It wasn't until the second week that I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. Tyler's side of the room was meticulously organized, almost obsessively so. Every book, every pen, every article of clothing had its place. He never left anything out of order, and he seemed to get anxious if I accidentally moved something on his desk. At first, I thought he was just neat, but the way he'd quietly fix anything I touched made me uneasy. Then there were the noises. At first, I thought they were just the usual sounds of dorm life, doors slamming, people laughing in the hallway, the hum of the air conditioner. But these were different. Late at night, when the building was quiet, I'd hear Tyler whispering. Sometimes it sounded like he was talking to someone on the phone, but I never heard another voice. Other times, it was just a low, steady murmur, almost like he was reciting something under his breath. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was none of my business. One night, I woke up to the sound of shuffling. I glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. Tyler was sitting on the edge of his bed, facing away from me, rocking back and forth. His laptop was closed, and he was clutching something in his hands. I couldn't see what it was, but the way he held it made my skin crawl. I pretended to be asleep, heart pounding, until he finally lay back down. The next morning, I found a small, folded piece of paper on my desk. It wasn't mine, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. It simply read, "Don't ask questions." I looked over at Tyler, but he was already gone for the day. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe it was a prank, but the unease lingered. Over the next few days, Tyler grew more withdrawn. He stopped making small talk and barely acknowledged me. The late-night whispers became more frequent, and I started locking my side of the closet, just in case. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. One Friday night, I came back from a study session to find the room empty. Tyler's laptop was open on his desk, and a strange, metallic smell hung in the air. I hesitated, then glanced at the screen. It was filled with pages of handwritten notes, lists of names, dates, and what looked like coded messages. My stomach twisted as I realized some of the names were students from our dorm. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Tyler stood in the doorway, eyes wide, breathing hard. He saw me looking at his laptop and froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he said, "You shouldn't have seen that." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. My mind raced as I tried to think of what to say, how to act normal, how to get out. Tyler's hands trembled as he reached for the laptop, snapping it shut. "It's not what you think," he whispered, but his voice was shaky. I have to keep track. I have to know who's safe." I tried to play along, nodding slowly, but my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Are you okay?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. He stared at me for a long moment, then finally said, "You should probably find another place to stay tonight." There was something in his eyes, fear, desperation, maybe even guilt. I grabbed my backpack and left without another word. That night, I slept on a friend's floor. The next morning, Tyler was gone. His side of the room was empty, every trace of him erased. I never saw him again. Later, I learned that Tyler had been quietly reporting suspicious activity to campus security for months. He'd been tracking students he thought were in danger, convinced that someone in the dorm was targeting them. The coded notes were his way of keeping order in a world he couldn't control. Some called him paranoid, others said he was a hero, but no one ever really knew the whole truth. Most people never find out the truth about who they're living with. Sometimes the scariest secrets are the ones hidden in plain sight, right across the room. College campuses are meant to be places of growth and opportunity, but safety is something that can never be taken for granted. Even in the most familiar environments, it's easy to overlook the small steps that can make a big difference. Did you know that nearly 1 in 5 college students report feeling unsafe on campus at some point during their studies? It's a reminder that vigilance matters. Whether you're walking back from a late class, locking your dorm room, or simply paying attention to your surroundings. Simple habits, like traveling in groups at night, keeping emergency numbers saved, and trusting your instincts, can be the difference between an ordinary night and a story you'll never forget. The truth is, danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in the routines we trust the most. If you thought the first story was unsettling, you're not alone. But what happened next will make you question just how safe those quiet corners of campus really are. The library is supposed to be a sanctuary for students burning the midnight oil, but after dark, it can become the setting for something far more sinister. The library was my favorite place on campus. It was a haven of quiet, a place where the chaos of college life faded into the soft rustle of pages and the gentle hum of fluorescent lights. I often stayed late, especially during midterms, when the rest of the world seemed to disappear and all that mattered was the next chapter, the next set of notes. That night was no different. I settled into my usual corner on the second floor, surrounded by stacks of books and the comforting silence that only a library after midnight could offer. First, everything felt normal. The only sounds were the distant tapping of keyboards and the occasional squeak of a rolling chair. I lost myself in my work, barely noticing as the hours slipped by. It wasn't until I looked up to stretch that I noticed him, a man sitting several tables away, staring in my direction. He wasn't reading or typing, just watching. I tried to ignore it, telling myself he was probably waiting for someone or just lost in thought. But every time I glanced up, his eyes were fixed on me. There was something unsettling about his stillness, the way he didn't even pretend to be busy. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how empty the library had become. Most students had packed up and left, leaving only a handful of night owls scattered across the floor. I tried to focus on my notes, but the sense of being watched grew heavier with each passing minute. After a while, I decided it was time to leave. I packed my bag slowly, hoping he would lose interest. When I stood up, he did too. My heart skipped a beat as I realized he was mirroring my movements, keeping a careful distance but never breaking eye contact. I walked toward the elevator, forcing myself to act casual, but every instinct screamed at me to run. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. Just as the doors began to close, the man slipped in behind me. The small space felt suffocating. I stared straight ahead, pretending to check my phone, but I could feel his gaze burning into the side of my face. The ride down was silent, each floor passing with agonizing slowness. When the doors finally opened, I hurried out, heading for the exit. The security guard at the front desk was gone, probably making rounds. I glanced back. The man was still following, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I quickened my pace, pushing through the glass doors and into the cool night air. The campus was deserted, the paths lit only by scattered streetlights. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that he would turn and go his own way. But when I glanced over my shoulder, he was still there, matching my pace. I cut across the quad, heart pounding, searching for anyone else who might be around. The buildings loomed like silent sentinels, offering no comfort. I reached for my phone, pretending to make a call, hoping it would deter him. "Hey, I'm on my way back," I said loudly, though my voice trembled. "Yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes." The man didn't slow down. If anything, he seemed to draw closer, his footsteps quickening to match mine. I ducked into a side path, hoping to lose him among the maze of walkways. For a moment, I thought I'd succeeded. The footsteps faded, replaced by the distant hum of traffic. I let out a shaky breath, trying to calm my nerves. But as I rounded the corner, he was there, waiting. He smiled, a slow, unsettling grin that sent chills down my spine. "Why are you following me?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. Panic surged through me as I realized it was my student ID, the one I'd lost a week earlier. He held it up, letting it catch the light. "You dropped this," he said, his tone eerily calm. "I've been waiting to give it back." I took a step back, every instinct screaming at me to run. "How did you find me?" He shrugged. "It wasn't hard. I see you here all the time. You always sit in the same spot, always leave around the same time. People are creatures of habit." The realization hit me like a punch. He'd been watching me for longer than I'd realized, tracking my routines, learning my patterns. The library, my sanctuary, had become his hunting ground. I turned and ran, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my dorm, slamming the door behind me and locking it tight. My hands shook as I called campus security, but by the time they arrived, the man was gone. All that remained was my ID, left on the steps outside. For weeks after, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every late-night study session felt like an invitation. I changed my routines, avoided the library after dark, and never walked alone. But the memory lingered, a reminder that sometimes the scariest dangers are the ones that blend in, waiting for the perfect moment to step out of the shadows. You won't believe how this night ended. Some questions are never answered, and some fears never truly fade. Have you ever felt watched, even in a crowded place? It's a sensation that can creep up on you when you least expect it. A prickling at the back of your neck, a glance that lingers just a little too long, a presence you can't quite explain. Most of us brush it off, telling ourselves it's just our imagination, that we're safe surrounded by friends, classmates, and the familiar routines of campus life. But sometimes that feeling is a warning we shouldn't ignore. College is full of moments when we let our guard down, at parties, in dorm lounges, or walking home after a night out. It's easy to believe nothing bad could happen when you're laughing with friends or dancing in a crowded room. But danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it slips in quietly, hiding behind a friendly face or a harmless invitation. If the thought of being watched in the library sent chills down your spine, the next story will make you rethink every party you've ever attended. Because sometimes, the real threat isn't a stranger in the shadows. It's someone standing right beside you, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The night started with laughter and music pulsing through the walls of a packed off-campus house. It was the kind of party everyone talked about all week, the kind that promised stories you'd remember for years. Colored lights flickered across the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of cheap beer and perfume. I arrived with a group of friends, our arms linked as we squeezed through the front door, already shouting over the noise to find a place to drop our coats. Inside, the chaos was overwhelming. People danced in the living room, cups in hand, while others crowded the kitchen, shouting over each other for drinks. The bass thumped so hard I could feel it in my chest. I lost sight of my friends almost immediately, swept away by the tide of bodies. I tried to follow, but every turn led me deeper into the maze of strangers. At first, I didn't mind. I chatted with a few people I recognized from class, laughed at a joke I barely heard, and let the energy of the party carry me. But as the night wore on, the crowd grew wilder. Someone spilled a drink on my shoes, and a couple started arguing loudly in the hallway. I checked my phone, no signal. I tried to text my friends, but the message wouldn't send. That's when I noticed him. He was standing by the staircase, watching me with a fixed, unsettling smile. I didn't recognize him, but he seemed to know exactly who I was. Every time I glanced his way, he was there, eyes never leaving me. I tried to ignore it, telling myself he was just another partygoer, maybe a little too drunk. I decided to find my friends and leave. I pushed through the crowd, calling their names, but the music swallowed my voice. The house felt bigger now, the rooms twisting into unfamiliar shapes. I ended up in a dimly lit hallway, the noise from the party muffled by closed doors. My heart pounded as I realized how alone I was. Suddenly, the guy from the staircase appeared at the end of the hall. He blocked my path, his smile never fading. "Looking for someone?" he asked, his voice low and too casual. I tried to step around him, but he moved to block me. "You shouldn't be wandering around by yourself," he said, leaning in closer. His breath smelled sharp, like alcohol and something sour. I could feel the walls closing in, the hallway shrinking with every second. "I'm just trying to find my friends," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. He laughed, a sound that didn't match his expression. "I can help you with that. Why don't you come upstairs? It's quieter up there." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt heavy. I glanced back, hoping someone would come down the hall, but it was empty. The music from the party seemed miles away. He reached out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was tight, his fingers digging into my skin. "Come on," he insisted, pulling me toward the stairs. I twisted away, panic rising in my throat. "Let go of me," I shouted, but the noise from the party drowned me out. He tightened his hold, dragging me toward the staircase. My mind raced, searching for a way out. Suddenly, a door opened behind us. A couple stumbled out, laughing and oblivious. I seized the moment, yanking my arm free and darting past them. I ran down the hall, pushing through the crowd until I burst out the front door and into the cool night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the end of the block, gasping for breath. My phone finally buzzed with a message from my friends. They'd been looking for me, too. I told them what happened, and we agreed to stick together for the rest of the night. Back at my dorm, I stared at the red marks on my wrist, the memory of his grip lingering long after the party ended. I never saw him again, but the fear stayed with me. I started avoiding big parties, always keeping my friends in sight, always watching for the stranger in the crowd. What happened next will make you think twice about every party invite. Sometimes, the real danger isn't the dark alley or the empty street. It's the crowded room, the familiar faces, and the one person who's been watching you all along. College is supposed to be a time for making memories, but some nights leave scars you never expected. There's something about walking alone at night on campus that stirs a primal fear, no matter how many times you've done it. The familiar paths and buildings take on a different character under the glow of streetlights, every shadow stretching longer, every sound echoing louder. Even the most confident students feel their pace quicken, glancing over their shoulders as if expecting someone to emerge from the darkness. It's a fear that unites everyone, a silent understanding that the world changes after midnight. We tell ourselves it's just our imagination, that nothing bad could happen in a place we know so well. But deep down, we all know the stories, whispers of strange encounters, footsteps that follow, and doors that close when no one is there. It's the reason we clutch our keys a little tighter and keep our phones within reach. If you've ever felt that chill walking back to your dorm, you're not alone. But the last story is the most haunting of all. What happened in the shadows of an old dorm building still remains a mystery, and its secrets have never truly been uncovered. Stay with me, because this final tale will linger long after the lights go out. The old dormitory stood at the edge of campus, its brick walls weathered by decades of storms and stories. Most students avoided it if they could, choosing newer buildings with better lighting and modern amenities. But when I transferred mid-semester, it was the only place with a vacancy. My friends joked about the dorm's reputation, how it was haunted, how strange things happened there, how no one ever stayed for long. I laughed it off, telling myself that ghosts were just stories to scare freshmen. The first night, I noticed the silence. Unlike the lively halls I was used to, this building felt empty, the air heavy with dust and secrets. My room was at the end of a long corridor, the overhead lights flickering as I unlocked the door. The space was small and cold, with creaking floorboards and a window that rattled in the wind. I unpacked quickly, eager to settle in and prove to myself that there was nothing to fear. But as the days passed, little things began to unsettle me. At night, I'd hear footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, stopping just outside my door. When I looked through the peephole, there was never anyone there. Sometimes, the lights would flicker and buzz, plunging the corridor into darkness for a few heartbeats before humming back to life. I told myself it was just old wiring, nothing more. One evening, as I was studying, I heard a faint tapping from the wall behind my bed. It was rhythmic, almost like someone was knocking from the other side. I pressed my ear to the wall, but the sound stopped. When I pulled away, it started again, softer this time, as if whoever or whatever was on the other side was waiting for me to listen. I tried to ignore it, but sleep came slowly, haunted by the thought of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. The unease grew with each passing night. My dreams became restless, filled with images of dark hallways and faceless figures. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced that someone was standing at the foot of my bed. Once, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my room, a shadow that darted away when I turned on the light. I searched every inch of the space, but found nothing out of place. One night, the power went out during a storm. The building was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from flashes of lightning outside. I lit a candle and tried to read, but the shadows seemed to move with every flicker of the flame. The tapping on the wall returned, louder this time, joined by the sound of footsteps pacing the hallway. I held my breath, listening as the footsteps stopped outside my door. The handle rattled, and I froze, heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, the door creaked open a few inches, though I was certain I'd locked it. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and something older, something musty. I called out, but my voice sounded small and uncertain. The door swung shut with a bang, and the footsteps retreated down the hall. I sat in silence, gripping the edge of my bed, too afraid to move. The next morning, I found muddy footprints outside my door, leading down the corridor and vanishing at the stairwell. I asked my neighbors if they'd heard anything, but most just shook their heads, avoiding my eyes. One girl, her face pale, whispered that she'd seen shadows moving in the hallway at night, but she refused to say more. Determined to find answers, I started researching the building's history. I learned that decades ago, a student had disappeared from my very room, never to be found. Some said he'd gone mad. Others believed he'd been taken by something that lived in the walls. The stories varied, but they all ended the same way, with a warning to never stay alone after dark. The final night, I decided to confront whatever haunted the dorm. I stayed awake, lights off, listening to the storm outside. The tapping began, followed by the footsteps. This time, I stood and faced the door as the handle turned. The door opened slowly, revealing only darkness beyond. I stepped forward, heart racing, and whispered, "What do you want?" A cold hand brushed my arm, and I stumbled back, slamming the door shut. The tapping stopped. The footsteps faded, but the sense of being watched never left. I moved out the next day, unable to spend another night in that room. I never found a logical explanation for what happened, and no one else seemed eager to talk about it. The old dormitory still stands, its windows dark and silent, waiting for the next student to fill its empty halls. Some mysteries on campus are never solved, and sometimes the shadows hold secrets that are better left undisturbed. If you ever find yourself alone in an old dorm at night, listen closely. College is supposed to be a place of growth, friendship, and unforgettable memories. But these stories prove that even the safest spaces can hide the darkest secrets. From the unsettling truth about a roommate's hidden life, to the silent terror of being stalked in a library, to the chaos and fear that can erupt at a party, and finally, to the chilling mysteries that linger in the shadows of an old dormitory. Each tale is a reminder that danger can be closer than we think. The most ordinary nights can turn into nightmares, and the people or places we trust most can sometimes become the source of our deepest fears. But these are just a few of the countless college horror stories out there. Every campus has its own legends, every student their own close call or unexplained encounter. Will you be the next to experience something you can't explain? Or have you already lived through a moment that still haunts you? Share your own stories in the comments below, because sometimes the scariest tales are the ones that come from real life, and your experience might be the next warning someone needs to hear.